the unexpected. These are the kinds of subjects a man named Robert L. Ripley challenged us to
believe it or not.
There are several good reasons for going to a bank. To cash a check, pay a bill, make a deposit, or simply to visit your money. George Washington is an old friend, a familiar face on the $1 bill. Thomas Jefferson, he's on the $2 bill. These other gentlemen are fairly well known. Honest Abe, Abraham Lincoln, is on the $5 bill. Alexander Hamilton is on the 10. Andrew Jackson is on the 20. And the stern face of Ulysses S. Grant graces the $50 bill. But now, the faces become a little less familiar. Let's see how many you know. The $100 bill, the gentleman who is famous for flying a kite. Benjamin Franklin. The $500 bill, a president assassinated in 1901. William McKinley. $1,000, the 22nd and 24th President of the United States. Grover Cleveland. The really big money, however, is over here. The man on the $5,000 bill is a gentleman we would all like to get to know a little better. James Madison. This gentleman is Salmon P. Chase. He was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, and before that, Secretary of the Treasury. His face is on the $10,000 bill. But that's not the highest prize portrait in this gallery. This one is worth 10 times more, $100,000. The man whose face is on this bill was once a school teacher and a president, Woodrow Wilson. And then there is the gentleman who lurks behind this mysterious veil. His figure adorns a $3 bill. It was issued back when banks were permitted to print their own currency, before the National Bank Act of 1863 gave the government a monopoly on printing money. This bill was issued in 1852 by the Central Bank of Troy, New York, and features a bearded gentleman in a sleigh pulled by 8 tiny reindeer. Santa Claus. Look deeply into my eyes. Or, if you prefer, gaze into the gleaming depths of this simple pendant. These are the tools of the hypnotist, but only in bad movies and second-rate books where mysterious swamis and Svengalis often use hypnotism for evil purposes. In reality, hypnotism is neither mysterious nor evil. It is a tool of medical science. It can be used in psychiatry and sometimes to ease pain in childbirth, asthma attacks, and the effects of migraine headaches. The effectiveness of the treatment depends not only on the skill of the therapist, but primarily on the ability of the patient. Although the therapist acts as a guide to relax the patient, only a person who wants to be hypnotized and is able to focus his or her mind can enter hypnosis. To measure the ability to respond to hypnotism, a test was developed at Harvard many years ago. A hypnotic procedure was recorded by an announcer who had never hypnotized anyone before. Then it was played for many groups of students.
If you'll now please sit up straight in your chair, close your eyes, and relax. Continue, however, to sit up straight. That's right.
After a period of time, in every case, over 85% of those who listened to the tape entered into some degree of hypnosis. The results proved that hypnotism does not depend on mysterious powers or shiny trinkets.
I want you to imagine that this little bit of cotton wool is a baby bunny, and this is a mummy bunny. And when I turn on the engine, they're going to go round and round and round. But you see them going round and round. Isn't that lovely? Listen, now I want you to pop your wee head back, and I want you to keep looking at these bunnies. And you're going to watch the bunnies going round and round and round. And very soon you're going to see a foxy chasing.
In a procedure used regularly with Dr. Smith's young patients, Jane's imagination is used to induce a hypnotic state.
And now I see your hand is beginning to lift. So just let it lift. Your little left hand, it's lovely. Your left hand, how lovely. And you can see that lovely little foxy. Now what I want you to do for me is I want you to help me. I want you to help me to save the bunnies. Because the bunnies there, they're hiding again, you see? I want you to help me save the bunnies. What I'm going to do, I'm going to blow some air into that little toothy of yours. And I'm going to blow some lovely happy air, because, you know, it makes a funny wee noise. And we're going to blow the air on the toothy, and that will clean out the little hole in your tooth, and we'll let the bunnies go into that little hole and hide. Shall we? Oh, shall we? Oh, how wonderful. See, this is the little thing that blows the air. And it's going to blow a little bit of air. You see the air blowing, do you? You see the air blowing? Now I'm going to blow that air in your toothy. Are you ready to help the bunnies? That's lovely. Oh, the air is not strong. That's lovely. Now keep looking at those lovely little bunnies now. And we're going to clean out all the dirt and all the rubbish out of that little hole. In this case, the cavity is fairly deep. It involves two surfaces of the tooth going from the biting surface right down to the level of the gum. Normally, this is fairly painful, and you're cutting through areas of where there's thousands of nerve endings, and it's not only painful, but it's very uncomfortable. Now, that was beautiful. Did you enjoy that? Did you? Was it fun? Tell me more about the foxy.
The mechanisms by which hypnosis can suppress pain has been the subject of serious investigation in the United States. One of the leading investigators is psychiatrist Martin Orne.
Altered perception depends upon focusing your attention and utilizes imagination. It is the ability to imagine deeply which seems to help individuals to modify their sense of pain.
Dr. Orne has used hypnosis to treat a variety of medical and psychiatric disorders.
Gervis is a 52-year-old man who developed premature Parkinsonism when he was about 35. This is a tremor of the hands and feet which tends to get progressively worse. In addition to Parkinsonism, he also has large involuntary body movements which have a psychological rather than a physical origin, and which are the main reason why he's totally disabled at this time. I'd like you to tell me how things have been going since you began treatment.
No. I feel like it's helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know? Every time I did the exercise, I seem to slow down voluntary, involuntary movements.
Right, and there are really two conditions. One is that your right hand shakes like that.
Yeah, right leg.
And you at one time had both hands like that.
Both sides.
And the left was fixed by an operation.
Yeah.
And then you have the other kind of involuntary movements, which are the big involuntary movements, which bother you even more, it seems. Now, would you just for a moment look at me, and as you do, you'll find your eyes will begin to grow tired and heavy, and they'll gradually begin to close. Heavier and heavier, more and more relaxed, sinking, drifting.
Because he is experienced in the procedure, Gervis is able to enter hypnosis in a relatively short time.
And you'll be able to find that you'll gain complete control again with your left hand making a fist by itself. As it does, all of the movement will go into your left hand, and all the movement will stop once your left hand has made the fist. When your fist opens, you'll feel more relaxed, sinking, drifting, and this comfortable, easy feeling, and you'll feel good. How do you feel? Good. With time, it should be possible for Gervis to learn to control the large involuntary movements and to essentially eliminate them. These are the movements that have a psychological basis. As far as the small tremor, his Parkinsonism is concerned, that is a neurological problem. But it is not what incapacitates him. He could lead a normal life despite the tremor. With hypnosis, he can even learn to control it.
A West African python can tie itself into such a tight knot, it can roll like a bowling ball. Believe it or not.
When you know you're going to be on stage, you want to make sure that you look your best and that you're properly dressed for the part. Appearance was especially important to a gentleman named Hugo Ball. He was a poet and a leader of an artistic movement called Dada. A hat like this was part of his costume, which looked like this. The number 13 on the cardboard tube that covered his face had nothing or everything to do with his performance. Dada artists didn't claim to make sense, but they did want to make unconventional artistic statements, most of them as a form of social protest. In this case, the statement included waving a small flag while reciting a nonsensical poem. The poem was written and first performed by Hugo Ball in Zurich in 1916. And it remains to this day a classic example of what Mr. Ball called sound poetry. Here's what it sounds like. A totally imaginary language invented by Mr. Ball. Kawani jolifanto blumba o fali humbla. Grossiga me pafla habla horami gaga gorman. High globlo ikora sula huju. Holaka holala. An logobang, blagobang baso futaka. Ooh. Shampa uwala wasa. Olobo. Hechtada gora message zumbada. Wulubu susuba de uluwasa suba de tamba. Baumf. Kasagama. Baumf. It didn't make any sense, but it wasn't supposed to make any sense. But nevertheless, Mr. Ball's performance got a rousing ovation and turned out not to be a passing fancy, but a new art form, sound poetry.
In Toronto, Canada,
The sound of a solo bass clarinet marks this renovated factory as the regular meeting place of a group of world-renowned sound poets called the Four Horsemen. Musician Steve McCaffrey is a respected critic and literary theorist. He also performs frequently with a musical group called the Last of the Red Hot Dadas. Another member of the Four Horsemen is B.P. Nicol, a recipient of Canada's prestigious Governor-General's Award for Poetry. He also writes books for children that utilize the harmonic principles of sound poetry.
Milk on a plate, milk in the sink, give it to me, give me a drink. In any of these poems I've written for children, be it this one about milk here, or say this one here that I've written for my daughter called Digabada Bugada, there are certain basic elements that are the same through all of them. And for instance, this phrase, Digabada Bugada, is a phrase my daughter used to say when I'd come in to wake her up in the morning. Digabada Bugada beep, my daddy's still asleep. Digabada Bugada bake, I wonder when he'll wake. Digabada Bugada bib, I'm lying in my crib. Digabada Bugada bout, I think that I'll climb out and wake my daddy up. Digabada Bugada bop. So you can hear, I mean, the phrase itself is a nonsense phrase, except it was very meaningful to Sarah, so that's one thing. And in child babble, you get that, which is something of what you hear often in sound poems.
Critically acclaimed poet Rafael Barreto Rivera is the third member of the group. Another well-established Canadian poet, Paul Dutton, completes the quartet. With his arrival, the rehearsal of a new work in progress can begin.
A bit on the literal side there at the end.
Not bad.
Yeah.
By experimenting with pure sound, the group hopes to explore new ways to break through the limitations of language to create direct, emotional communication. The roof of the building often becomes the setting for an impromptu picnic. The four poets can plan future performances and reflect on past accomplishments. Although most critics have uniformly praised their work, some audiences have been less than overwhelmed.
When an audience gets hostile, gets angry maybe, they walk out, they boo, whatever, I find that, in fact, a very good response. It's a lot better than the kind of suppressed and non-emotional response you often get to a regular poetry reading.
We've done what we've done, I think, mostly because we've enjoyed it. And the reason we're still doing it after all these years of working as individuals or as a collective, I think is simply because we have a lot of fun at it.
For the Four Horsemen, pure sound is pure art. For the people in the Italian village of Monforte d'Alba, however, pure sound provides a perfect excuse for a festival. Once each year, visitors and local residents sign up to compete in a contest called the Festival of Free Screaming. As many as 5,000 people come to watch and listen while judges determine which of the contestants has the loudest scream. Starting with the children, the judges use special machines to calculate scream power.
104 sempre.
After the youngsters compete, festival managers introduce veteran screamers who have developed championship techniques.
114.
For some, the festival is a form of opera. For others, it's a call of the wild.
112.
As the contest ends, winners and losers alike gather to do it one more time.
Nose prints were at one time used to identify dogs on insurance policies. Believe it or not. We're inside the Martin Marietta NASA Space Training Center near Denver, Colorado. All of this finely honed equipment is designed to simulate the conditions of space so that astronauts can get the feel of what it's like to handle one of these, a manned maneuvering unit. The helmet is for safety and for communications. But in space, this backpack is not attached to all this elaborate machinery. The controls, however, are the same. And once you learn how to use them by taking a ride in the simulator, you can move through space as easily as a fish moves through water. An astronaut receives about 18 hours of training in this simulator, and then, with luck, he or she is ready to become part of mankind's greatest adventure.
13, 12.
The launch procedure has become routine. Yet each shuttle flight is a new beginning.
Main engine start. 3, 2, 1. Solid ignition and off.
To reach the silent grandeur of space, the shuttle first had to be perfected on Earth. Carried aloft under the wing of a B-52 bomber, an early prototype proved a new aerodynamic concept. An aircraft without wings and without power could be controlled in flight and guided to a safe landing. In time, designers developed a working scale model of their radical new concept. To find out if it would work, they put it through a series of intentionally destructive tests. From the wreckage, scientists learned what they had to know to begin a program of design and construction. Ultimately, the program would take 17 years and to date has cost almost $14 billion. To manipulate such complex equipment in space, the program also required the training of a whole new generation of astronauts. Until then, space was the exclusive domain of pilots. Shuttle missions, however, demanded the additional expertise of scientists and skilled technicians willing and able to do the job. To qualify, candidates must take off on Earth-bound flights that duplicate, if only for a few seconds, the weightless conditions of space. Learning how to handle an elaborate machine called a remote manipulator arm is also basic training for prospective mission specialists. It will be their job to launch or retrieve multi-million-dollar satellites. By practicing the maneuver in full-scale mock-ups, specialists perfect the skills they'll need in space, where mistakes are simply not supposed to happen. No detail of training or equipment is left to chance. All the protective suits worn by shuttle astronauts are made here, by hand. It takes about 2 months to make each suit, because the people who work at this fabricating plant in Frederica, Delaware, are determined to make sure each item is fail-safe. In space, the slightest flaw could be fatal. A spacesuit is actually a miniature spaceship, complete with a built-in life support system. To make sure the astronauts are able to move freely while wearing them, one man's full-time job is to get inside every suit and put it through a series of tests. Simple movements representing the actions an astronaut will have to perform in space must be repeated hundreds and thousands of times without undue stress and with no damage to any part of the suit. It's not the suit, but the person inside the suit who is put to the test here in Houston, Texas. By being submerged, astronauts can learn to work with heavy equipment just as they will have to do in space. Surrounded by divers to assist in case of emergency, with their movements constantly monitored, astronauts practice using the manned maneuvering unit. Once the techniques are mastered, the confines of the tank are replaced by the limitless reaches of space. In orbit, 150 miles above the Earth, astronauts are no longer bound by the law of gravity. For them, there is no up, no down, and no need to walk when they can float. The lack of gravity complicates eating, but it also adds an element of surprise to every meal. On board the shuttle, laying down to go to sleep can be done in any position. Astronauts simply slip into sleeping bags and attach themselves to the floor, the ceiling, or walls. Unless restrained, their arms float freely in zero gravity, just as they would if they were not tucked in so snugly. Experiments on board the shuttle are proving that man can survive for long periods of time in space and ultimately overcome the disorientation created by the lack of gravity. The reaction of monkeys and other animals to what's called space adaptation syndrome is also being studied.
What we have here is
As part of the research, insects have also been passengers aboard the shuttle. An experiment involving honeybees was devised and observed in a shuttle mock-up on Earth by a young Tennessee student named Dan Poskovich. He wanted to know what effect weightlessness would have on the ability of bees to construct a honeycomb. The answer from space was reassuring. As Dan observed, the bees went about their business as usual. The orbiting shuttle is able to perform experiments that would be impossible on Earth. A fragile solar panel designed to capture the energy of the sun is carried aloft in a package that is only 7 inches thick. When it is fully deployed, however, it extends for over 100 feet, about the height of a 10-story building, the largest structure ever assembled in space. Such successful experiments are only part of the shuttle's mission. Another regular task is the launching of satellites. It's entirely likely that the program you're watching right now is being transmitted to you from outer space. For space shuttle astronauts, launching satellites is easy. Making service calls takes a bit more effort. The first step is getting inside the spacesuit that permits them to leave the shuttle. Once through an airlock opening into the cargo bay, the mission specialist takes control of a manned maneuvering unit. There are no safety lines, no tether to prevent the astronaut from simply floating away. The mission is monitored, but the astronaut is flying solo. Although the shuttle seems to be motionless, in reality, it and the free-floating astronaut are both moving through space at a speed of 17,500 miles an hour. The astronaut is entirely dependent on the maneuvering unit to bring him safely home from a solitary journey into space. Unlimbered from the cargo bay, the remote manipulator arm snakes out toward a satellite to be rescued. Once the astronaut makes contact, the maneuvering unit will provide enough power to tow the satellite to within reach of the arm's grappling mechanism. On Earth, the satellite's dense package of electronics weighs about 5 tons. In space, it weighs nothing. Missions like these are not isolated adventures. They are part of a dream that is no longer impossible. With the experience and expertise gained with each shuttle flight, mankind is moving closer to the day when space can be colonized, when entire communities will circle the Earth in permanent orbit. Plans for the construction of a space colony are already in work. These are actual NASA projections. First, a massive framework will be suspended in orbit. Then, on consecutive flights, the shuttle will deliver a series of modules which the manipulator arm will put into place. Each module is large enough to house 6 people. Each one, however, will have a different purpose: housing, recreation, storage, workstations, and laboratories. Ultimately, all the modules will be interconnected so that inside, colonists can work and live in a shirt-sleeve environment as comfortable as this NASA mock-up of the space station they propose. With the freedom zero gravity provides, there is no limit to the potential size of the colony. In time, The colony can expand to include manufacturing facilities, agricultural experimentation, and even a nursery for infants born in space. It is a dream, but then less than 30 years ago, the exploration of space was a dream. Florida diver Spencer Slate feeds a deadly 80-pound barracuda by letting it eat from his own mouth. Believe it or not.
It looks easy, but there's more to having your picture taken than primping, posing, and saying cheese. To get a picture that's just right, it takes a lot of elaborate equipment and a photographer with the eye of an artist, like Kevin Clark. I'm in his New York studio, and it may look like he's focusing his attention on me. He's not. The star of this photo session is this battered old red couch. Since 1979, it's been photographed thousands of times in hundreds of locations all over the country. It's a wonder that it's survived. This sofa's been hauled in trucks, vans, planes, canoes, and even on a dog sled. It's been buried in sand, mired in mud, suspended from helicopters, and sat on by an incredible variety of people. 2 photographers were involved in the project, American Kevin Clark and German Horst Wackerbarth. Their idea was to create a portrait of America with the couch as a unifying theme. They succeeded magnificently. The result is a book that's a work of art, and the diary of an adventure that lasted almost 5 years. The journey of the red couch began here, on Crosby Street in New York, when Kevin Clark and his friend, artist Russell Maltz, were moving the couch. On a whim, reenacted here, Kevin asked his friend to pose for a quick snapshot. From that accidental beginning came the idea to carry the couch around the United States and to use it as a centerpiece in an unusual series of American portraits. In Monument Valley, the couch created a new perspective of a classic American scene. It was also photographed on the floor of the American Stock Exchange, nibbled on by wild ponies in Virginia, and used the space shuttle as a backdrop.
This is an Amish family in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Horst approached the accountant who handles the dealings of the Amish people with the outside world. He checked his computer and found 3 families that he thought might go along with our request to make a portrait. The first family we asked complied, but when they saw the actual couch on the day of the shoot, they wanted to back out. They reluctantly agreed to go ahead with the portrait when we suggested we place the couch very much in the background, in the back of the field. This is Jim Brunson at the Westin Peachtree Plaza Hotel in Atlanta. He's a window washer. This is his everyday workplace. We worked for a couple of days securing the couch to the scaffold. And when it came time to make the shot, Jim just clambered out on the couch. I said, "Look, Jim, we don't need any heroes here. Why don't you put on your belt?" So he did. I hung over the side of the building, made the photograph of Jim in his everyday environment.
The strength of the portraits lies in the way the couch is placed in unexpected environments. In New York, Kevin and his assistant put it in front of a bank in the Wall Street area. For hours, Kevin unsuccessfully asked banker types to pose on the couch. Finally, he found a subject who agreed to be photographed.
Oh, this is Chester C. Burley III, an investment banker in the Wall Street area in New York. Mr. Burley walked by, dressed for a presentation. I described the project to him, asked if he would sit for the portrait, and he looked at his watch and said, "I'll return in 22 minutes. Exactly 22 minutes later, Chester appeared, sat on the couch, and we made the shot. This is Dr. Nathan Klein, a psychiatrist, photographed in his New York office. While Horst was making this photograph, he left the cushions in the hallway, prepared the shot, set the couch, placed Dr. Klein on the chair, went back to get the cushions, and they were gone. We later heard that a doctor had come upon the cushions, picked them up, took them to a utility room, lay down, and took a nap for a couple of hours. Horst went ahead, made the photograph, and really liked the couch laid bare of all its secrets and without its cushions.
Horst Wackerbarth, here in a candid grouping of Playboy bunnies, was the other member of the photography team. The two photographers shared this van to move the couch from location to location. In time, however, a duplicate was made so that the two men could pursue different artistic approaches. Although the van was the principal means of transportation, it was not the only way the couch was brought to a location. During the 5-year expedition, the couch was balanced on a canoe in Alaska and put behind bars in a New York City jail. It was also used for a portrait of a family living next to the 3 Mile Island nuclear reactor.
This is Robert Kleibert at his Hammond, Louisiana alligator farm. There are 500 of them in that pool, and they're all 16 to 18 feet long. An alligator can outrun a dog for 30 yards, and it's pretty dangerous to be up close with a wide-angle lens photographing those alligators. Mr. Kleibert was holding the stick to bop them on the head if they got a little too close to us. This is Alan Bean, former astronaut, photographed at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. Mr. Bean is wearing the spacesuit that he wore on the moon. He was the 4th human being to step foot on the moon. I used the couch as a monolith, similar to the monolith in 2001, The Space Odyssey, and waited until the full moon rose above Clear Lake, forming a triangular, very basic composition. This is the last photograph of the Red Couch book.
When Horst Wackerbarth and Kevin Clark completed their project in 1984, they decided that the Red Couch should be retired. Today, Kevin said, why not just one more? That's why we're here at the Dugal Color Lab, where it all began. And what we've got here is the last portrait of the Red Couch that'll ever be made. Maybe.
For most chefs, tossing a salad is an art. But in Thailand, one inventive cook has taken the idea to the extreme. When you place an order with him, you get more than a meal. You get a show. The basic ingredient is chopped up vegetables. However, it's not the garlic fish sauce or the spectacular flame braising that make the creations of Chef Clint Mahone so memorable. It's what happens next. The motto here is elegance in every move, which describes the chef and his assistant. Serving up such spectacular dishes has made Chef Clint Mahone a Thailand millionaire. Believe it or not.
Your weekend of wonder begins tonight with 4 hours of spine-tingling tales. First, a coven of witches invades the world of high fashion on Kolchak the Night Stalker. Then, the perfect summer home is infested with evil. William Cat stars in House 4, and an ancient instrument of death is being used to heal on Friday the 13th, the series. Prepare for the scares. Enter the dimension of darkness beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern. Now, stay tuned for mysteries, magic, and miracles. Sci-Fi Channel next.